Rwanda sir, shall we begin the session?
Ma'am, just wait for 1 minute. I'll start the recording and then you can.
Okay, sure.
Sarah ma'am, you can start.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, namaste, and very good morning to everyone. Welcome to the day 3 of International Conference on Innovative Teaching and Executive Learning 2023. Over the past 2 days, we have explored groundbreaking ideas and practices in pedagogy, and today promises to be just as inspiring. Before we dive into the exciting events of day 3, allow me to summarize the highlights from yesterday. We were fortunate to have two incredibly knowledgeable speakers who enlightened us on their respective subjects. Yeah. So first, we had a pleasure of hearing from Mr. Narendra Pamiri, who spoke on the topic of peer-assisted study sessions to enhance student learning. And next, following him, we had the speaker, Mohammad Mizanur Rahman, who explored the topic of research methodology, ethics, publications, and AI's too. Additionally, we had an opportunity to explore magnificent total of 22 oral presentations that were presented by brilliant educators all around the globe. These papers dive into various aspects of pedagogy, including AI in education and assessment strategies in the real-world scenario in teaching. All of these aimed at enhancing the learning experience in pedagogy. Now, let's focus on what lies ahead on day 3. Today also we have two incredibly experienced keynote speakers who will undoubtedly captivate us with their expertise. First, we have Professor Geoff Puri will give a hands-on workshop on use of ChatGPT in AI and learning. Next, we have Dr. Preeti Baligar, who will speak on strategies for implementation of problem and project-based learning. Before we dive into these brilliant topics, let me introduce you to the session chair for today. We have Dr. Shahbaz Haq with us, who is Assistant Professor of Communication Skill and First-Year Engineering Controller in School of Engineering and Technology at Anjuman Islam Khalsa Technical Campus, Navi Mumbai. Without much further ado, I'll hand over the forum to Dr. Shahbaz to continue this event. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
All right. So good morning, everyone. I hope you all are enjoying this session as it is completely involved in strengthening and enhancing our teaching, learning, and research aspects. So let us begin our third day by witnessing the speaker who is all the way, connecting from Australia. I'm really honored to introduce and welcome Professor Geoff Curry. Sir is acting as Professor in Nuclear Medicine, School of Dentistry and Medical Science, Charles Sturt University, Australia. And he's going to be the keynote speaker for today's first session. So Professor Geoff has a bachelor's degree in pharmacy, master's degree in medical radiation science, applied management, and business administration. So is a doctorate and has broad research and teaching interest and experience across the medical radiation sciences and health. Professor Geoff has more than 200 peer-reviewed journal papers, 2 books to his credit, 5 book chapters he has gone through, He is acting, I mean, he has edited 5 books, and he has, presented more than 190 conference presentations, and has acted as a reviewer for more than 25 international journals. So, talking about his professional stuff, Professor Jeff got trained at St. Vincent's Hospital in Sydney before relocating to Royal Prince Alfred Hospital for a senior appointment. After undertaking positron emission tomography training at the University of California, Los Angeles, he returned to Royal Prince Alfred Hospital to a senior role in Australia's first positron emission tomography department. After this, Professor Jeff entered the private arena where he established departments in Sydney and the Gold Coast before relocating to an established private company on the central coast of NSW. With extensive clinical management and research experience, a career in academia seemed logical for him, and he commenced his career at Charles Sturt University in Australia in the year 2002. So Jeff, thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and we all are looking forward to your amazing presentation. So you can start with your presentation. Over to you, Jeff.
Okay, thanks for that. I want to start with a disclaimer that I'm not a ChatGPT expert. I'm a ChatGPT user. And for me to use a technology like ChatGPT, I don't buy into the hype or the hysteria. I need to understand it for myself so I can actually assess its capabilities. I mean, I know the title said hands-on workshop. It's very difficult to do a hands-on workshop with ChatGPT when there's people on YouTube streaming and people remotely. It was hands-on for me putting it together, and I hope that you sort of appreciate how that sort of came together. So just a quick overview. I'll look at ChatGPT, look at a bit of the evidence that I've produced in higher education, look at some of the limitations and errors, how we might be able to get around some of those, and some of the applications. So when we think about AI, it has the potential to enhance student learning, which is why we're all here, and also to enhance student skill development. With that comes the trade-off that there's potential for misuse, in particular with cheating. And so AI tools are available in the clinical environment where people will work after they graduate. And as a result, we need to be thinking about how we do authentic assessment, where, students, why would we assess students in environment without ChatGPT if they're allowed to use it in the clinical environment after graduation? One of the big issues is contract cheating and ghostwriting sites, and it really threatens both student as well as scientific writing. And we need to be thinking about how academic integrity could be compromised and the resulting impact of that on the reputational damage to both the professions and the institutions, and any patient risk that comes with that, with graduates that didn't deserve their pass. There's also evidence that shows that academic dishonesty among students translates to dishonesty in the future profession. So if we have the ability to detect those students dishonest at university, then we can weed them out so they don't become problems in the profession. So as you know, ChatGPT is a phenomenon. It was released publicly on November 2022, and within 5 days, it hit 1 million users. And you can see that even Instagram and Spotify didn't grow that fast. So that's actually pretty rapid adoption. And what that means is that people are jumping on it without actually fully understanding how it works. More impressive is that it hit 100 million users within 2 months. We're still talking, it's only 6-7 months old, but at 2 months, it hit 100 million users. And this is before many of the actual semesters or sessions had started. And as a result, academic institutions responded by banning its use or constraining its use without actually even knowing how it works or what the impact could be on teaching enhancement. So ChatGPT is produced by OpenAI. It's a large language model. It's driven by a GPT, which is the generative pre-trained transformer, which is a kind of deep neural network. It has a learning cutoff of September 2021, which is really important. People misunderstand what that means, but we'll get to that shortly. The free version was using GPT 3.5 version released in 30th of November 2022. The GPT-4 version has been partially released. It's not its full version. So there's some components that are not included, but it was released mid-March 2023. So just a couple of months ago. So I guess the thing is that we're all kind of familiar with how AI works. We've dealt with the AI hysteria and hype in all things AI across the sectors for a couple of years now. And so we have a fair idea of how AI, artificial neural networks and things are trained to solve problems. So it's not uncommon for people to, extrapolate that onto ChatGPT because it uses a deep neural network and it's trained to actually think about that the same way. And so it's not uncommon in the conversations I have for people to demonstrate an understanding of ChatGPT similar to the little flow chart that I've put here, that we have some form of training data where we train the system to perform a particular task or solve a problem. That feeds into the GPT tool itself, which is the neural network. And then we have a prompt that we enter, a question or an instruction that goes into our ChatGPT pre-trained neural network. It may revert to some knowledge that it actually has learned, and as a result of that produces, we've got someone's background is really going crazy. Maybe some muting needs to happen. Thank you. And then it produces some sort of text in response to that, and you get your answer. And that's how a lot of people think about it. In fact, I wrote a journal article recently, and someone wrote a letter to the editor that was explaining their criticism of something that I'd said on the basis of this very diagram. Not this diagram per se, but this is how they explained or understood how ChatGPT works. And of course, you probably gather by now that is completely wrong. It doesn't work that way at all. As I said, I'm not a ChatGPT expert. This is my understanding of how ChatGPT works. It's a simplified schematic. It is far more complex than this. So this is actually sort of breaking it down into a simplified format. I've tried to color code it and use numbers to look at the sequence. But if we actually look at this simplified process, that we go through an initial pre-training phase where we use 300 billion tokens. That's like a token is like a word, or it could be two words together, or as an expression, using 45 terabytes of data and 175 billion parameters. Parameters are like brain cells or neurons. So we know that the human brain has 100 trillion. So that sort of puts it into perspective. And it's unsupervised learning, which means that it kind of looks at all this information in this 45 terabytes of data. It looks at it and it actually tries to understand how different words sequence together, because it's not actually learning the material, it's learning the sequence of words and the probability that words would follow one another. Once it's actually pre-trained itself, then we go through a human feedback system where it fine-tunes it. And so this is using reinforcement learning, where after human prompts and human conditioning, it's rewarded for getting it right and penalized for getting it wrong. And it just refines the learning to eliminate mistakes. So that feeds into our large language model. Then what we have to do is we have to have our prompt itself, our question or our instruction, and that gets fed in via the ChatGPT chatbot. If you're using it via Bing, then you're using an API to connect it to the large language model. But essentially, it's the same process. You have a prompt that goes in through some form of chatbot and into the large language model. In the large language model, it breaks down, based on its training, it breaks down the question or the instruction into smaller tokens. So it breaks down all of the words into smaller words or smaller tokens. Then it maps those tokens. So it goes back to the large learning model, comes back out in step 5, and maps those tokens against both semantic and syntactic properties that it's learnt during its training phase. That comes back to your large learning module. And then what we need to do is go, now that we've actually sort of put that into context, we need to contextualize the tokens to create new tokens. And that's what occurs via the GPT 3.5 architecture. Once it's actually created those new tokens within context, then it actually creates a probability distribution of what the next word is. So this could be occurring for 3 words. And then what it's doing is it's looking for, based on those 3 words, what word is most probable going to occur next. It doesn't know for sure. It's actually guessing based on how it was learning. And then we can choose either the highest probability word, and then it actually generates the text, returns it to you as a response via chatbot, or we can adjust our hyperparameters so it actually chooses it more randomly, so you get some variability in your responses. So if we're dealing with GPT 3.5, it can have 8,000 tokens as an input. It has a short memory of about 8,000 words and can operate in 24 languages. And as I said before, 175 billion neurons or parameters. If we look at GPT-4 version, the version that's currently available, the learning is kind of the same. That hasn't kicked in yet, so it's still constrained by September 2021. And so when we say it's constrained by 2021, it means it hasn't learned the actual possible sequences of words that might have occurred before 2021. And so what that means is that if something new occurs, and so we're using new kind of language to describe something, then it actually hasn't learnt that sequence of language yet. So it can't answer those questions. The big difference between GPT-4 and GPT 3.5, 10 trillion tokens, 1 petabyte of data, or petabyte of data, and 100 trillion parameters. And then it has a much larger input token of 32,000, longer, much bigger memory, 64,000 words. And yeah, the parameters range between 2 and 100, depending on who people talk to. But I think they like the word 100 because then it says that's the same number of brain cells that people have. So that's how it kind of works. If you understand how it works, then we can start to question how we can use it in higher education. So if I asked ChatGPT how I could use it in higher education, which is what I've done, I've asked it that question, it actually gives you a list, and it usually explains, I've truncated it, but this is its summarized list. It answers questions, provides explanations, offers study tips, supports clinical decision-making, offers career guidance, provides feedback on assignments, supports research, facilitates collaboration, practice quizzes and questions, exam tips and strategies, assignment writing, exam review, and citation and reference support. That's a pretty long list. It's actually pretty versatile, but can it really do all those things? When I start to think about how I just explained how ChatGPT works, my first thought is that it can't do these things. Because if it's all it's doing is actually putting words in order based on the probability that a word might come up, it's no different to your text messaging where it has predictive text and gets a word wrong. It thinks you're going to say, you know, mum, and you really meant dad, and you can actually get that text wrong. It makes mistakes. And so how can it actually do citation and referencing support if it's not actually learning the citation? It's actually just predicting what the next word might be when you actually start to form a string of words in a citation together. And that's why it fabricates data. So I did some research. I looked at a few of the roles. So it says that it can produce patient information. So obviously the advantage of actually having GPT produce patient information or answering patient questions is that Dr. Google can be quite slow. So when people are Googling something and they have to work out which of 100 pages to take notice of and looked at conflicting information, it's one source of information or one answer to the question. So the question is, even though it's more convenient and faster, is it more accurate? And the answer that we discovered when we looked at both in some nuclear medicine data was that the answer is no for GPT 3.5, but the answer is yes for GPT-4. So if we look at the performance, all of this orange indicates that it's really poor accuracy. So GPT 3.5 has really poor accuracy, whereas GPT 3.5 has poor accuracy. GPT-4 actually has pretty good accuracy. They both perform okay in terms of appropriateness of language, so professionalism of language for patients. The currency of information was poor for GPT 3.5, and the overall fitness for purpose was way below par for GPT 3.5 and acceptable for GPT-4. I also did some student written exams. And so this is just looking again at its performance. The blue columns are the student performance, the orange columns are GPT 3.5, and the grey columns are GPT-4. And as you can see, both GPTs perform worse than students in these written tasks, but at least GPT-4 passed the assessment. GPT 3.5 failed the task, and I'll explain some reasons for that shortly. I also asked it to do some calculations because it's actually apparently pretty good at doing calculation exams. And this is a bit more complex slide, but we can still look at the blue, dark blue being the mean for two different exams, radiopharmacy over here and pharmacology exam over here. So students are performing around that credit average. GPT 3.5, dismal fail in both exams. GPT-4, which is the light blue, passed both exams. The rest of the colours relate to whether they're complex questions or shorter kind of questions. And with the short questions, GPT-4 was able to get 100%. Now, we need to keep in mind that ChatGPT does not solve equations. It does not do calculations. It's not a calculator. It doesn't function like that. It functions exactly as I showed you before, where it actually is predicting. When it actually says, starts to put numbers down or an equation down, it's actually predicting what the number's going to be based on whether it's actually learnt the sequence of numbers before it. And so for it to get it right, it really kind of needs to have been trained on data that looks the same, so it can actually predict what the answer will be. And so we need to remember that it's not actually doing calculations. And also did it in a few exams. So these are student exams across second and third year of one of my courses. And you can see again, the students kind of performed fairly consistently, although they failed the pharmacology exam, or the mean result was. And GPT 3.5 kind of performed, around that, just above or below the pass average. GPT-4 only slightly better. But in the pharmacology exam, which was actually kind of interesting insight, GPT 3.5 and 4 did significantly better. And what this relates to is that this was general information. This was teaching pharmacology to medical radiation science students, not pharmacists. And so it means that the information was at a very general level. So information that is likely to be available on the internet that GPT could have seen and trained against. Whereas these other subjects in nuclear medicine are more specific for those students, and as a result, much deeper understanding is expected, and about information that wouldn't naturally be found on the internet that GPT could have trained and seen that sequence of words coming together. So it provides a really good insight into not only how we can use GPT, but also how we can avoid students using it as a cheating tool in our exams. So overall, the student performance was worse than GPT and 3.5 and 4 for multiple choice questions. So what that means is that with multiple choice questions where both the question and the answer is actually part of the input, GPT is very, very good at actually working out what the sequence of words will be. And so, so multiple choice questions are not easily able to confound ChatGPT. And in long answer questions, again, this is in pharmacology, you can see that the students perform poorly. GPT 3.5 and GPT-4 both performed at an above pass level, and GPT-4 performed particularly well because these questions were of a superficial general nature that using information that GPT had been trained on. So despite how it performed in that one exam, generally speaking, across exams and written assignments and calculation exams, GPT performs poorly, certainly below what the average student would perform. So if you're a pass student, you're actually going to penalize yourself by using ChatGPT. If you're a fail student, you're probably about even. So So I pointed this out to ChatGPT and said, look, you have these limitations. How do you get around those? Considering these limitations, what can you actually help me with as an academic teaching students? So it said, yep, understand, but I'm good for writing assistance. So we need to keep this in mind. ChatGPT is not designed to write assignments. It's designed to provide general writing tasks like generating ideas or outlines or proofreading something that's already been written or paraphrasing or providing sentence structures. When it comes to research, it doesn't do research. People are talking about using it to write their introduction or write their methods. That is, misconduct, or that is not good academic integrity. Is a ChatGPT can help you find resources, help you craft some keywords or specific topics and narrow down a research topic, not develop it. And then there's ideas around study aids, time management. I'm not sure how AI tool is going to help too much with time management, but it also claimed to provide mental health support. And what we need to remember is that I would be very, very cautious about recommending a student who is having a mental health issue that they rely on an artificial neural network to provide them with the support rather than going to a human person that can actually guide them in the right direction. So I find that one a little bit troubling. So this table comes from a paper that's about to be released in a journal. It's not yet in print, but basically breaking down ChatGPT's claim capabilities and what the result and outcome is from my evaluation. And so there's a couple of areas where it was pretty much hopeless. There's a few areas where if you used it, cleverly, you might be able to use it a little bit, but there's only two areas that really provide significant help, and that is language assistance and accessibility to support technology. So how do I use it? What's my preference for using it? So for students, I like students to be able to use it on the fly in class. So if I'm teaching, then I like my students to be on ChatGPT because sometimes I talk fast. I mean, I know that I'm going a little fast now because I'm limited for time. But if I'm moving through something because I'm excited or passionate about it, then sometimes it's too fast for the students to take adequate notes or to digest something. They don't want to ask a question. So they close the gaps in what they understood from what I said by asking ChatGPT. More importantly, what ChatGPT can do is actually provide questions for them. So it provides clarification about something I've said that then allows them to ask a question in class. So it creates a richer class environment by students using ChatGPT to check up on what I'm teaching them in the class environment. So that's a really powerful tool. And this is an example of one of my friends doing an MBA in the USA, where they were actually looking at why is there inflation, spelled typographical error, but they were actually doing it in the class for that reason. There's another way that I like to use it, and that is to get students to write something original and use ChatGPT to help refine the structure. So if this is their original work, so they've asked it they've tried to explain first pass metabolism, they've done the hard work, they've done the research, this is their work. It's not ChatGPT's work, it's their work. And they've said to ChatGPT, can you show me how to word that better and more professionally? And so that's what ChatGPT has done and provided some advice. So it's actually said, so what I've actually done is this is how I've reworded it, and this is why, and this is what effect it has. The students not only learn to shape their own writing style, but they actually learn skills as part of it. So ChatGPT can help them develop skills in writing. I have no problem with students using it for this either. Students can use it to create structure for their writing and research. So I have no problem with setting a student an assignment task, and they actually say to ChatGPT, can you suggest a structure and the key concepts that I need to research to include in this particular assessment task? And ChatGPT might spit out something that looks like this, a template that they can follow. Again, ChatGPT is not doing the hard work. It's actually providing guidance on where the student should go. And if a student asked me this in class and said, Jeff, how can we, how can I shape, what should I include? This is the kind of thing that I would provide them with. So it's not cheating. It's actually doing what academics have been, the support that academics have been providing for years. In fact, I wrote a subject outline yesterday for a new subject where I actually included the ChatGPT suggested structure for the assignment that they had to do. So I actually did the ChatGPT query for them and then actually put in what ChatGPT suggested for the assignment structure. You can also use it for discussions. So in this particular case, having students ask ChatGPT, can you simulate a conversation between a health professional and a patient? And what happens is that not only does the student learn from the interactions, they're honing their skills, learning to understand how to communicate on a particular topic with the patient, but they also get to critique it and improve it. So when the ChatGPT says that this is how you respond in a certain situation, well, then you can sit there and say, well, actually, that's actually okay, but maybe there's something better that we can do and we can improve it. So it allows students to both hone their skills, but also critique and improve the responses. So it's a double whammy in terms of learning. In terms of how I use it, so I'll also use ChatGPT to generate an answer. So here I'll ask it a question, it'll generate information, and then I'll put that information in an exam. So I'll put this in the exam and say, okay, students, ChatGPT has provided this answer for this question. Can you critique it, please? So what they've got to do is they've got to identify where ChatGPT did well. They need to be able to find errors and correct it. They need to talk about tone and how it presents and any omissions that are there. And this is really powerful because it not only teaches them to understand the topic, but it also shows them the limitations of ChatGPT, which then teaches them, well, I probably don't want to rely on this in my own exam because, you know, I gave it a fail when I actually critiqued it myself. So some of the errors and issues we've heard about hallucinations and confabulations. And this is actually really important because the way that ChatGPT works is that it's looking for the most likely sentence structure or words in a sequence. And so sometimes it's wrong. And we hear a lot about the terms that have been used are in bold there, hallucination, delusion, and confabulation. And these are not new terms. They've been used associated with artificial intelligence for a number of decades, but ChatGPT has sort of seen them spawn, particularly the word hallucination. But those three terms don't actually cover all of the different errors and understanding those errors. So I've actually created a few additional terms that help to differentiate. So when we say this error is a hallucination, well, it's not really a hallucination. It could be an illusion because the two things are quite different. And so, and this has been published several times in terms of the language that's being used. But a hallucination is a plausible response that's actually incorrect. So if ChatGPT told us that loratadine does not cause sedation because people think about it as being, and widely across the internet, it's talked about as being non-sedating antihistamine, but it's not. Technically, it's a less sedating antihistamine. And so ChatGPT will not have learnt the less sedating language because it's less commonly seen in the training data. So that would be a hallucination. An illusion is similar to a hallucination, except it's an error of similarity. So it might mix up cimetidine with being used for allergy because it's a H2 histamine blocker. And so it's kind of, lumping it in with the antihistamine category as well. A delusion is a false belief or error. So even after correction, that if ChatGPT insisted that captopril and ramipril have the same pharmacokinetics, well, we know that they don't. Sometimes we have what's called delirium, or what I've called delirium, where it produces sophisticated but nonsensical answers because the algorithm itself is overwhelmed or confused. So it could actually explain about GIT absorption of a fentanyl patch, for example. And then you can have confabulations, which are lies, where it fabricates information. It just makes stuff up. It does this quite often with citations. If GPT 3.5 generates citations, 75% of them are completely false. And that can catch students out. You can also have errors of extrapolation or interpolation, where it seems logical that something is connected, but it's not. So if ChatGPT said captopril is used to manage ongoing hypertension, well, that's extrapolating it because ramipril is used for it and lisinopril is used for it. But captopril has different pharmacokinetics, much shorter half-life, and is not suited for ongoing hypertension management. You can also have miscalculations or blunders, and this is important to differentiate because, in fact, it's actually the wrong term because, as I've already explained, ChatGPT does not do calculations. So, in fact, is that when we think about it making a calculation error, it's actually a hallucination, even though we're going to call it a miscalculation because it's dealing with numbers. My favorite, this is something I've introduced more recently, is temperament, and it's consistent with the psychiatric language that we've used up to this particular point, where sometimes when you're dealing with ChatGPT, it can seem to have a different mood or several different moods. It can change mood, mid discussion, and as a result of that, then it can seem to have a bit of be temperamental. And what this is actually hyperparameters. And so hyperparameters are things that are usually default in the system, but they can change when it's busy or at different times of the day, in my experience. And they're things that we can actually change on the fly as well. So it's influenced by things like hyperparameter changes and what's called prompt engineering, which I'll explain in a second. I apologize if you can hear my dog barking outside. There's a little miniature dog outside getting crazy. So I apologize if that's coming through. So remember I showed you this simplified diagram previously. And what I've done is I've cleared out some of the information, but just to show you why it's important to understand how ChatGPT works so you can actually understand the errors it makes. So if those, in terms of the training, if there's bias in the training data, then it can produce all of those things: hallucination, illusion, delusion, confabulation, extrapolation, and miscalculation. All those can be produced by poor training data. But our data entry, that delirium can occur at our chatbot or our large language model interface. Our hallucination generally occurs at the point where you have the conversion of your input text into smaller tokens. Your illusion occurs when it actually tries to map those to your semantic and syntactic properties. Your delusion occurs associated with the context, and then your confabulation occurs when you actually go through the GPT architecture and probability distribution. Extrapolation and miscalculation can then occur once you decide that probability, and we can influence all of those by our hyperparameters, which reflect your temperament. So prompt engineering and hyperparameters. Can users craft their prompt, so the input, question or instruction, to produce better responses? And the answer is yes. Can this enhance student learning? Absolutely. Can it make it harder to detect cheating? Absolutely. Okay, so this is a benefit. Prompt engineering and playing with hyperparameters can improve learning. It can actually get better responses, but at the same time, if students use it, they can actually hide cheating a little bit more effectively. So what is prompt engineering? It's if we think about when we write assessment, so if we're writing an exam, just imagine an exam question, then we want to make sure that when we write that exam question, the instructions are very clear. We're using unambiguous and simple language. We're not using double negatives. We don't use unquantifiable terms like never and always. The instructions are clear, and we try to use shorter questions rather than long convoluted questions. So for example, if we said, what is first pass metabolism? It's kind of poor because the student really doesn't know what context we want the answer in, how much detail. If we kind of said, explain first pass metabolism in the context of oral medications, then that's better and they have a better understanding of what we're trying to do. But if we added a bit more detail and specifically instructed them to provide a specific example of a prodrug and the importance of first-pass metabolism to bioavailability, assume a certain degree of health literacy, and don't exceed 500 words. Now the student knows exactly what I'm asking for. So we do that with questions. We need to do the same thing with our ChatGPT prompts. The same principle applies. So we need to provide information that's important. We need to provide succinct instructions, clear instructions, unambiguous language, and we need to tailor it for what we want our outcome to be. So skillful prompting allows the user to capture their own voice and style, but also the intent in the generated text. And it reduces the likelihood of a hallucination, illusion, delusion, or confabulation. It doesn't eliminate it entirely, and well-crafted prompts will produce higher quality, concise, and more appropriate responses. So a prompt could be a question or instruction, as I said, and it contains 4 parts: the instruction or the question itself, the context, the background information, the framework, the input information, so if there's any additional information that you need, like 500 words, and then the output format. What format do we want it in? Do we provide it with examples of the format? So few shot prompting means that we actually include some sort of format or structure for it to answer in, or 0 shot we don't. Obviously, if it's a complex task, then few shot prompting is a better way to go. So we need to incorporate domain-specific knowledge, identify the target audience, be specific about the content and objectives, break it into smaller tasks instead of one big one, and avoid things like pragmatics and ambiguity, as I've already said. So what does that do? If we enhance with our prompt engineering, then what occurs is that because our prompt is more accurate and reflective and includes the context, it means that we get more accurate breakdown into tokens, we get better mapping of our tokens, better contextualization of our tokens, and as a result of that, we have more accurate prediction of the next best word, and as a result of that, you end up with a better outcome. And we can also fine-tune it a little bit with using our hyperparameters, which I'm going to talk about next. So what we can actually do is we can say, what is first-pass metabolism? And you can see you end up with this long, convoluted, doesn't really answer the question, doesn't get into any depth answer. If we actually look at a similar instruction where we say from oral medications, we end up with a shorter answer. It's more focused, but still doesn't provide the depth that I want. And so then if I actually define 500 words specifically with the broader understanding, then you can see that now I get an answer that is very focused and has the depth of insight that I actually expected from my students. So when we talk about hyperparameters, we talk about temperature and tone. And what that means is that these are the hyperparameters that change the randomness and variability of the responses. And so temperature ranges from 0 to 1.0, and the default setting is 0.7. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. And the tone is usually defined as balanced, precise, or creative, but you can do some other things as well. So what I've actually said is define pharmacology, pretty bland question. And I've set the temperature to 0.2. And what that means is we're going to get a pretty standard response using very generic words. It's going to be well structured and coherent, but it's going to be very cold and bland. And so that's the response that we get. All the correct words in the correct order, not much variability. And if I asked the question again, I'm going to get a very similar response. If I change the temperature to 0.5, then now what we actually get is still a fairly standard answer, but it starts to explore a wider vocabulary and starts to be more expressive in terms of its responses. So the information is the same, but it's expressed a little bit more uniquely. 0.7 is the standard, not a lot different to 0.5, but if I go to 1.0, what I'm essentially doing is telling my GPT that it has a very broad license to explore word choice. It can actually apply them randomly rather than the highest probability. And what it does is actually creates very original responses that are very different to everybody else's, but it also loses fluency. It creates redundancy. So we've actually got information in here that is kind of redundant. It can use some words. Certainly there's words that it's used in here that I wouldn't choose to use in that context. But I've given it the license to do that. And so if students were doing that, you can see that how they could actually use this temperature to create very, very different responses from other students. So you remove that similarity. When it comes to tone, here I'm actually sort of said, okay, define pharmacology, but use a balanced tone. And it gives me a fairly similar answer to my original answer using a temperature of 0.7. And you can see that using that language, it's pretty balanced kind of language. If I actually get a little bit creative and I actually say, define pharmacology, but now I want a tone of creative, then it turns it into something like this. It sounds fantastic. It's definitely creative. It's very expressive. We lose a little bit of the accuracy, but generally speaking, when I read through this creative one, it has all of the components of this balanced argument. It's just expressed them more flamboyantly. It's far more expressive. So it's not concise. It's still relatively accurate, but it's certainly creative in the way it expresses it. I can go the other way and ask for a precise one, and it comes back to the original information, but it reads a little bit in a kind of turgid or stale fashion. There's a few other things I can do. I can ask the same question, and I can actually say, can you do it in a friendly tone? So tone's friendly, and all of a sudden it changes the professional language a little bit. I can do this in a different way by using my own language. So instead of saying define pathology, if I said, hey, ChatGPT, is it okay if you could define the pharmacology for me? I'd be really thankful, or please do it, or whatever. If I used a really friendly tone in my question, well, then it will actually adopt a more friendly tone in its answer. And of course, there's all sorts of expressions I can use. I can actually define terse, and you can see I got not even a full sentence. And in just another example, I asked it to provide a condescending answer, and you can see that it's certainly obliged. So students could use this, or we could use that to provide more novel answers or outputs. So one of the problems that I've had with ChatGPT is that, if we ignore the problems with referencing and confabulation, so the lies that it makes up and the misconduct that actually kind of provides, if we just ignore that for a moment and focus on the content itself, then in my experience, is the reason ChatGPT doesn't answer well for my subjects is it provides shallow insights. It doesn't connect to practice. Research is shallow and narrow. It leaves the answers well short of what my expectations of a student would be. Language tends to be more colloquial than professional. It has repetition. It doesn't like word count, so it doesn't, if you ask it to do 2,000 words, it's going to spit out probably 750. It lacks currency of information at times. Certainly the references are not appropriate. And when it does get a reference right, it's usually something that's fairly obscure. So the problem here is that how can it actually pass? So when you actually look at those subjects where in a written exam, it kind of just passed, it got a 55 or a 56%, then how can it actually do that? And the problem with it is that, and I've gone back through many subjects of mine and other people's and actually found this is a problem, that when we actually look at our learning outcomes for our subject, it might actually say describe, explain, and implement to professional practice with specific reference to a particular topic in your subject. And so that should be the minimum pass requirement. So if we expect that this is what students would have as a learning outcome for the subject, then we expect when we put a rubric together for an assessment task, that we also should have that as the minimum or pass expectation. Unfortunately, typical rubrics don't. It would be more like a credit. So what I've done is, this is an example of part of a rubric. I've got rid of the distinction and high distinction columns. I've also got rid of some of the other criteria just to focus on this particular aspect of it, where our criteria is to demonstrate and apply theoretical knowledge, and then to synthesize so show understanding and discussion. And our pass requirement, keeping in mind this subject says that students should be able to describe, explain, and implement to professional practice specific reference to whatever the content is that we're teaching. So this rubric says that a student will pass if they can recall some facts accurately and if they can apply relevant information correctly within context some of the time. So we're really sort of saying that if they can some of the time use accurate facts and provide knowledge in context, does that translate to describe, explain, and implement to professional practice? It doesn't. It does. So the credit, so here, the credit line is where the pass mark should be. So to get a pass, students should have to perform at the credit level. And what that then does is it makes this pass level a fail, and it means that those ChatGPT responses are now fail grades. Unfortunately, it also means some students will get fail grades, but that means that they're below the standard, whether they cheated or whether using ChatGPT or whether it was their own answers. If they're below the learning outcome standard, then they shouldn't get a pass for it. So this is actually a significant solution to some of the problems we've encountered with ChatGPT. There's other solutions as well. You can stage tasks so that students have to submit something at multiple time points or to share it within a Google Doc or other shared file. We need to educate students about use, misuse, and their professional responsibilities. We need to integrate it into our learning environment. So think about how we build it into those assessments. And I've given you a few examples of how I use it as we've moved along. But to do that, we need to re-engineer our assessment, and we need to recraft both our learning outcomes and our marking rubrics to provide authentic assessment of students that's independent of ChatGPT. So it means that the student performance and whether they pass or fail is independent of whether they use ChatGPT or not. So that means that we've just got to re-engineer the way we think about assessment and the way we think about our marking rubrics. And also we need to embrace ChatGPT because it's here. If we don't use it, if we don't immerse it in ourselves in that environment, our students are going to, and we'll get left behind. So allow ChatGPT to be used for specific purposes. Ask questions that allow students to have a deeper insight into their learning. So they help students on the fly. Provide questions in exams, or get students to use ChatGPT and then critique the answers. But I also use ChatGPT to quality assure my own exam. So when I write an exam, if I run all the questions through ChatGPT, it doesn't remember them. It doesn't feed them out into the internet. It's not connected that way. So that fear is not there. But what it will do is that when it gives me the wrong answer, it allows me to, or gives me two answers, it allows me to look for the ambiguity. It actually highlights that the question would be difficult for students to answer because of some ambiguity in the actual questions. And of course, as I gave an example, using ChatGPT to simulate a conversation between a patient and the professional. So I'm just going to very quickly talk about conference abstracts, because we actually ask our students, as well as us as researchers and academics, to submit abstracts to conferences. And so I thought, well, we know that there's lots of fabricated abstracts out there. How well does it do it? Because students could be using it to write abstracts for us as well. So I've actually asked ChatGPT, please write a conference abstract that includes results for a comparison of an ACE inhibitor and angiotensin receptor blocker in the management of hypertension. And what it did is it produced what I wasn't expecting. It actually produced a systematic review and meta-analysis, which is a valid form of research, and it reads really well. Largely, in my experience, this would actually get accepted for presentation at the conference. There are a few clues that it's been fabricated. The focus on cardiovascular disorders rather than on renovascular hypertension. The definition of a comprehensive literature review rather than it actually being a kind of a specific methodology that we'd expect. Relatively round numbers, 1,200 and 5,000. My research, I've never had a round number. It's always, I might aim for 5,000 people, end up with 4,852. And then this language. that's very typical. ChatGPT uses it a lot if you actually pay any attention to ChatGPT. So I actually asked it again. I said, well, that's not quite what I meant. I actually meant to actually, do a real comparison, like, pretend that I've got original data. Now, I don't have any data. I've actually asked it to fabricate the data, essentially, for ramipril and losartan. And you can see that I didn't use the word fabricate, make up, or anything. I just said, can you do the same thing, but with simulating a direct comparison? And so it complied, and it gave me this wonderful abstract. This abstract is fantastic. And it actually shows the research method that was done, and we've got some great results. And again, there's a few clues that it's actually fabricated, defining it as original data analysis twice. So it's trying to convince people that it's a original data analysis. Same issue with the cardiovascular. Looking at losartan and ramipril as a monotherapy, which clinically it never is. It's always with a diuretic for essential hypertension. Again, round numbers, and you can see this language that was, I said was common, has actually been duplicated in this one as well. I even did one where, in a different study, where I didn't like the results. The results said, A was better than B. I said, can you do the same thing, but I want B to be better than A? And it obliged. It just produced beautiful abstract that showed the results that I actually wanted. So it's a real problem. Now, of course, everyone's talking about BARD, and I realize I've got 2 minutes to go. And BARD versus ChatGPT are very, very different things. And the purpose of BARD is to actually create a dialogue between the user and the other person. So it's connected live to the internet. So and it learns and pulls things back from the internet, so it's not constrained by a particular time point. But it's not designed, BARD is not designed for generating text like I've been describing. So ChatGPT remains the best tool for doing that kind of text generation. Excuse me. BARD's very exciting and it's very powerful, but it has a very different purpose of creating dialogue, like human-like conversation between the computer and the user. So I won't go into that in too much detail. So in summary, ChatGPT, excuse me, has limitations that are barriers to use for both cheating and enhanced learning. It has capabilities that can be exploited to enhance learning, which is what we should focus on. The best capabilities and the biggest threats to academic integrity are perhaps not where we're focusing our attention on. Understanding where opportunities lie and threats that exist and capitalising on those opportunities and truncating those threats requires a deep understanding of ChatGPT. We can't just be users. We've got to kind of understand the tool that we're using before we should use it. It's a rapidly evolving landscape that's best served by immersion in that landscape so that we not only enhance the learning of our students, but we keep pace with student misuse. So that brings me kind of neatly to the end of the hour. And any quick questions?
Yeah, so thank you very much, Jeff. It was indeed, a very thoughtful session, and the way you covered the details on ChatGPT was like really, important for all of us. So yes, we have got one question in the chat section. It says, what is the medical version of ChatGPT?
There's no medical version of ChatGPT. There's a Dr. Google. I mean, there's a medical version of Google search engine, but that still requires the same as doing a Google search to be going through the data. The ChatGPT itself, it's been trained on all of that medical information. So any information that was in its training set, it can actually learn from that. And it can actually predict text. It's very good at actually saying, I'm not a doctor and you should go to a doctor, or you should seek medical advice. This is not advice. ChatGPT tends to provide that disclaimer. But in terms of a medical version, all of those examples where you've seen ChatGPT passed the US Medical Association's exam or the Law Association and all the rest of it, all those exams are using standard ChatGPT.
Okay. Requesting the participants, if you have any question or something, you can put it in the chat section. So Jeff, you said like, ChatGPT is basically, it's an assistive tool. And do you really think it should be taken as a source for, content creation and knowledge related purpose?
No, ChatGPT should not be used for knowledge generation. It should be used as a tool for us to actually enhance student skill development. It doesn't write well, in my opinion. It writes things that are convincing, but are not necessarily true and accurate. And the last thing we want to do is, and those abstracts are a really good example of it. It produced something that is plausible, that if a student read it, they'd look at it and go, okay, well, that must be true because I read it, but it's actually miseducating them. It's undermining education. So there are some applications that we can actually use, to enhance learning, but we have to be really careful about not, undermining education by thinking of it as an actual text generator, because the text it generates is okay if it's creating a framework for learning, if it's providing some ideas about structure of a research or structure of an essay, but to actually formulate the response itself is a major problem, and it will unlearn, it will undermine people's learning. I see a question where it's on the chat where someone says, will it decrease linguistic skills? And the answer is it could. It could do all those things depending on how people lean on it, right? And this is, I guess, the point of my presentation. This tool is there. If it's used wrong, everything could go pear-shaped in higher education. Our students could actually come out as not meeting their minimum requirements, not having learnt what they should have learnt, misconduct and all those other things. But if we lean on it in a different direction and use it appropriately, then it can be positive in all those things. And linguistics is one of those examples. If we rely on ChatGPT to do language conversion for someone where English is a second language, then that person's never going to improve their language. But if that same person uses it to enhance their understanding of language, then it can improve their language. So it depends on how you look at it and use it. If you use it as a shortcut, then it will, yes, 100%, it would decrease people's linguistic skills. But if you use it as a skill enhancer, then it will build those same linguistic skills. So we have this tool that can be used for good or for evil. And it's up to us to fully understand how it works so that when we implement it, we're using it for good and we're kind of pushing evil back into its box.
Right. So now talking about, as you said, it should not undermine the education. So as an educator, what do you think? I think Reshma ma'am has raised a question. She says, what are the key aspects, one should control or monitor or should be aware, when it comes to usage of ChatGPT, as an educator or from the educator's perspective?
Yeah, look, I mean, subject to some of the things that I've talked about here, using hyperparameters to modify things and all the rest of it, is that it's pretty easy to pick up when someone's done something with AI, especially if they've done other work. So, so you have to actually use tools that can pick it up and penalize. Is that the bottom line is students, if we don't penalize students for effectively cheating, then we don't teach them not to cheat. They learn that cheating's okay. And so for me, I've just looked at a whole bunch of first-year exams, and almost 50% of the class have been put forward for investigation because they used AI. And it was really easy to detect. They'll get off with a warning, but now they know that we've seen it. We know how to detect it. And as a result of that, we need to discourage it. So we have to penalize them, because if we don't penalize them, then they don't learn that it's wrong. And then it's just a matter of, if I write my exams in a way that AI can't pass it, right? I ask questions that the students have to show deep insight and understanding. They can't, I block, copy and paste on the exam. So they can't just copy and paste. So I'd have to type it in manually, which is a problem. I use diagrams. So I actually put a diagram in the exam and actually ask a question related to the diagram. And without the diagram, ChatGPT can't answer the question. So there's lots of ways that you can actually confound ChatGPT. But the important thing is that, you know, don't do assessment that is not actually enhancing skills. You know, if the student's never going to do something in the future in that particular format, then why ask them to do it as a form of assessment? So we really need to be a bit more clever about how we do assessment and how we assess assessment by modifying the rubrics that I've sort of suggested in my presentation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you have answered what Ankita ma'am is also asking for. How do you think we can keep, you know, a check on wrong usage of ChatGPT or abuse of it? So yes, rubric, as you mentioned, and that's right. Okay. I would go with the last question. So now, you know what, Jeff, for a beginner, you know, as an educator, what do you think, you know, he should, you know, start or initiate with the process of ChatGPT, you know, for the students, like talking about the instructions of the classroom and then assessment and all those things? How do you think one should initiate ChatGPT stuff with the students?
Yeah, so for me is that I'm very open with the students right up front. I tell them what ChatGPT can do. I can tell them what they can't do. I tell them the consequences of cheating. I tell them how good I am at detecting their cheating so that they're not going to get away with it. And then I punish them if I catch them. But then I also show them how to use it. So I actually embrace it in class. And I, you know, as I said, I've actually put into their assessment to say, okay, use this template from ChatGPT. So I've actually shown them in the way that I model my teaching where it works well and where it doesn't work well. And at the same time, I've done all the evaluations, and I've, you know, I mean, on the screen now, you can see I've got a few publications this year around the use of ChatGPT in higher education. My students are aware of those results. So not only do they sit there and go, okay, Jeff's not sitting on the periphery, right? Going, here's ChatGPT. He's actually in it. I've immersed myself in it. And so the students know that I understand how it works and how it's used and how I can actually detect it. If I was just sitting on the sidelines, not engaged with it, they'd think maybe they could actually trick me and get it past me. But ultimately, my students, I show them how it works, how it can be used well, and the limitations of it. And so I'm really open about that. And when they see how poor that is in terms of cheating, they don't use it for cheating.
All right. Thank you very much, Jeff, for your amazing session.
Dr. Shabazz, I have a quick question, if time permits. Is that?
Yeah, sure, sure.
Jeff, interesting talk. So as we see, you know, computational powers in kind of increasing exponentially, and when you're looking at maybe 5 years, 10 years from now, when these models becomes more sophisticated, how do you envision the future around that in terms of the opportunities that it really brings up in something like a personalized coach and a kind of learning assistant to our students? Where do you see this going? I mean, within a year or so, it's just exploded around it. And, you know, maybe 10 years from now, when we see, you know, more fine-tuning of the model, maybe more computational power given to it. What's your thoughts on that? How do you extrapolate it maybe 10 years from now?
Yeah, I think it's actually really difficult to think too far ahead because you're 100% right, this is moving so fast and we don't really know where it's going. What we need to do is actually just focus on where the profession is going. So depending on what profession you teach into, so for me, I'm teaching, you know, nuclear medicine students, for example. And so for me, I need to keep an eye on how ChatGPT or how any of these other AI tools are used in the professional space, because how they're used in the professional space is how I should use them in the education space. So if it moves in the clinical space, then I should move my expectations. And whereas if it doesn't move in the clinical space, then I need to actually keep my expectations the same at university. And so that kind of defines where it needs to go. And so as our professions evolve, we might find that in 10 years' time, no one is expected. We might find that people just don't write anymore. We might find that AI technology is so well advanced in radiology and nuclear medicine and medicine generally that that, you know, all reports are AI generated. No one has to write letters. It's just automatically done by an AI tool. And if that becomes a skill that we no longer need, then we shouldn't be asking students to write literature reviews and things at university anymore either, because they don't need those skills when they graduate. So I would hate to think that we got to that situation, but what we need to be doing is thinking about the skills that students need when they graduate and ensure that whatever AI tools we have don't undermine those skills. And if they don't need those skills, then what does it matter if AI helps them out?
Great. Yeah. I mean, just to kind of, future protect them in the way the technology is coming, I think it's important for us to kind of keep a close eye on how it's evolving, and so that they are ready for it. It doesn't come it's like a tsunami for them, and they become outdated in the market when they're coming on site and developing their careers. Yeah,
100%. And that's something that, a number of people, including myself, have been quoted in papers about general artificial intelligence, or some of the AI research that I've done, where, people sit there and say, are we going to lose our jobs? And the answer is, people don't become redundant to artificial intelligence. They become redundant to people who have artificial intelligence capability. So it means that if a student is GPT literate, then they're going to be more valuable to the workplace than someone who's not. And we saw the same thing when computers emerged and when Excel spreadsheets emerged. If you could use those tools, then you're more valuable in the workplace. Absolutely. And so that's what will happen.
It's about augmenting the intelligence as such, right? Thank you so for your insight. It's been an honor, and it's just amazing talk. And I think definitely that is where the future is. And I think as an educators, we really need to have a close eye on it. And I'm fairly impressed that, being someone in medicine and pharmacology, going such deep into, GPT and LLMs is fairly impressive. And typically, guys like us who are in life sciences, we kind of typically be, more away from these stuff, but it's just nice to see that.
No problem. I appreciate being invited to chat to you all, and I hope it was useful, and enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Dr. Shahbaz.
Thank you very much, sir. So, Jeff, thank you really very much for this wonderful session. May I now request Professor Rohan Das Gupta to share the appreciation certificate as a mark of our appreciation. So, Jeff, thank you very much. We wish to, see you here at our campus at Anjuman Islam's Khalsa Technical Campus, Navi Mumbai, very soon, maybe in the near future.
We'd love to visit.
Yeah. So thank you very much.
No problem at all.
Yeah. Thank you.
Say bye.
Yeah. Bye. All right. So participants, moving ahead. Now we are moving forward with the second keynote address of today's session. And I think Preeti ma'am has joined. Preeti ma'am,
yes, she has joined.
There?
Yes, Dr. Hek, I've joined.
All right. So welcome, Preeti ma'am, for today's session. So dear participants, it's my honor to introduce our keynote speaker with you all. So Dr. Preeti, she is a doctorate in engineering education and is acting as assistant professor at the Center for Engineering Education Research, KLE Technological University, Hubli. Ma'am is member of American Society for Engineering Education since 2019. Her core experience and research lie in the design of instruction and faculty development for interdisciplinary design-based PBL and blended learning courses in first year undergraduate engineering. Ma'am's contribution to engineering education research is given here. We wish to share a few of them. So as a researcher, ma'am's areas of interest or publications are related to design of problem-solving experiences in first year of undergraduate engineering through two courses, engineering exploration and design thinking for social innovation. She also, relates to empathy development in service learning courses, then change readiness for PBL in Indian engineering institutes, then course design in PBL and student-centered learning environments, then identifying the elements of complexity in a design problem, then enhancing prototyping skills of interdisciplinary design experiences in first-year undergraduate engineering education, then ethics instruction in first-year engineering education, designing research experiences for undergraduate engineering students. With this, ma'am has several publications related to engineering education and is also a co-author of the International Handbook for Engineering Education Research. She is also a reviewer for several engineering education conferences and journals. Now, talking about the engagement with professional community, ma'am has engaged with the professional community through workshops, webinars, FDPs, focusing on developing institutional best practices, outcome-based education, engaging students in small groups, designing student-centered learning environments, PBL, blended learning, and research methods and tools. Currently, she is the facilitator and co-supervisor for the PBL certification program for India, which is a collaboration between KLE Technological University and Aalborg University, Denmark, till the duration of December 2023. And also, the convener for Regional Research Symposium for PBL till June 2024. Ma'am has served on the technical committees for several conferences in various capacities as technical chair, as a technical committee coordinator, and so on. So thank you very much, ma'am, for accepting our invitation. And we request you to start with your session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Haq. Thank you for inviting me here. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I have. Can share this. I just pulled up my screen. Is it up at your end?
Yeah, ma'am, it's fine.
Yes, sir. Firstly, I should thank Professor Sheikh for inviting me to the conference on innovative teaching and exuberant learning. I'm grateful to the organizing committee members. I saw a list of them there. I thank you for organizing this and bringing us all together despite our busy schedule. So the topic that I have here is strategies for implementation of problem and project-based learning. Before I actually go into what it is all about, I like to spend a couple of minutes on my center, that's the Center for Engineering Education Research at i-CiTeL, Hubli, Karnataka. Our vision has been to promote innovation and teaching in education, in engineering education, to bring about qualitative change in students' learning experience. Started off in 2011, the spirit of engineering education innovation was alive in campus much prior to that. But in 2011 is when SEER was institutionalized. Since then, SEER has engaged with several communities, engineering education institutes, and collaborations to make sure that we are able to bring in a change in students' experience. We have 6 broad objectives. One is to empower faculty members with best practices in curriculum design. We also work for encouraging innovation in curriculum design through a number of courses on campus. We influence faculty mindsets to recognize importance of research-driven instructional practices. And this is where we come into the picture, wherein we conduct faculty development programs on i-CiTeL for i-CiTeL. We also have a yearly faculty conclave where faculty members are able to showcase the innovations in teaching and learning. We are into offering innovative courses and programs. In fact, the engineering education PhD program at i-CiTeL is one of its kind in India. We also have global partnerships and collaborations with other universities and engineering communities. And finally, as Professor Haq rightly pointed out, we do a lot of workshops, trainings, and conferences as our outreach activities. If you want to reach us out, you can always, I'll share my email ID at the end of this session, and we can connect based upon your need. Now, taking this forward, the agenda of today's session is, most importantly, is your response to the questionnaire that I floated out last week. I should thank Professor Sheikh for following it up and giving a very good response to it. We have some 50 responses to this. I will not spend too much time on what is PBL because that is not the agenda of this course. It's more about implementation strategies for PBL. Even then, I'll just spend a couple of minutes on why there's a difference between a traditional approach to teaching and learning and PBL. What are the drivers? What is not PBL? What does it take for an institute to move to PBL? What are the different approaches and the levels of PBL? The most importantly is the principles of PBL, which any institute needs to operationalize based on their context. Professor Haq, do you hear any background noise from my end?
No, ma'am.
No, right? It's clear. Thanks. We have a campus-wide. All right. So last one here is our current activity, wherein we have a collaboration with Aalborg, Denmark, for a PBL certification program. Yes. So most importantly for me is your results from the questionnaire. I had 6 questions in there, and we asked about what is your discipline. We see that more than 23 of them were non-engineering, but almost an equal number were engineering faculty members. We also saw about your status of your institute. And yes, most of the participants today, they belong to the affiliated institutions, and around say 20%, 25% of them come under autonomous and university. And we also have the role of the individuals today, in which most of us are into teaching and learning, which is in a way good, because we are the ones who will eventually bear the torch for any changes or innovation of teaching and learning. Finally comes about awareness on PBL. A large, I can say that not aware and heard about it and practiced it. They constitute around almost 88% of the participants here, which is good for us to start off discussion. A very minute set haven't heard about it, but a substantial set have actually published articles on that. This is a kind of a response I have from the participants today. Now, the most important question there was about the challenges that faculty members face while implementing PBL. These challenges may be either perceived or it can be experienced challenges. I'd invited for both of these. Then actually I took some time to organize these challenges based upon the themes. One of them is challenges related to student learning. You also have challenges for faculty learning, implementation, time management, curriculum, and so on. Let me first show what you think are the challenges for students. Non-involvement of members of the project, yes. Learners not able to devote time for the project work, which is true. We also have students need to have more motivation as compared to lecture-based learning. Yes, it is obvious, it is required. Then there's a lot of additional work that comes with students. So additional work doesn't come because of the bloated curriculum. It comes because of the ownership and the responsibility the students have to take in their learning. And also there's one faculty member who said that even though we have electronic projects on electronics, they don't want to invest funds on them. Yes, it is a problem. Then no active participation. Understanding level of students. As you know, PBL all goes in a team-based learning environment. So even if one student in the team is not very up to it, then it's obvious that that student may pull down the others. So the item 6 on your list, understanding the level of students, is very important. Students' engagement, yes, keeping them motivated is very difficult. The 8th item is a very insightful one. It says it needs a mature interaction between teachers and students. I'll touch upon this in a couple of minutes. Overburdened students, yes. These are the challenges of students. Most of them are related to either student motivation, extra work, and the burden that comes with self-learning. I was surprised to see that the faculty are mostly focusing on student-related challenges, and very, very few faculty members gave me those insightful conversations about faculty-related challenges. In here, the faculty are talk about their own poor response and involvement that is required to make PBL a success. Cooperation of colleagues, yes, it's a relational aspect. Without my colleagues, I can't really grow much when it comes to education innovation. It's a big challenge. And the last one is when we become guides in a PBL project, what is our willingness and what is my competency to invest in my own learning so that I'm able to push students forward in their project. Next comes time related. I'm sure that there are many more challenges, but by and large, these are the few challenges that we came up with under faculty related. Time related. It is obvious that around 85% of the participants here belong to affiliated institutes. So they will face this problem about completion of content and then do PBL, or maybe even what content is suitable for PBL. How do I manage time when there are real projects, especially when the students have to go out to the industry to collect data? How do I do all this within your limited class hours? The next set of challenges that you have stated comes from the resources. It is obvious that PBL is a resource monster. You are aware of it. It's been almost the 9th year of my PBL experience in India, and I still see how resource hungry my PBL classes, my PBL ecosystem at KLE Tech is. So these resources are required are respect to technology, the experts, the tools, the classrooms, the physical infrastructure, the people, the manpower. All these are huge. Even the budget, yes. Next comes to the core of this course design. Now, while we are able to handle somewhat resource-related style challenges or even student-related challenges, the major hindrance comes during course design and the faculty's own inability or faculty's own current understanding of what PBL is and how to implement it. So these two challenges, I picked up the top two among all of them, which speaks about the stepwise planning of PBL and the implementation of the PBL design in a given classroom. Next is curriculum integration. If you see, the first one spoke about probably a single course, whereas the second challenge at the course design speaks about an entire university-wide integration of PBL. In fact, I'll take you examples about how the item one, that is a course level PBL, and how a curriculum level PBL has been implemented in not just in India, but in other countries as well. Lastly, assessment-related challenges. Yes, this is something that we all have to do a soul searching on. It's all about a 3-hour. We generally use in a traditional lecture-based learning environment. We have a 3 hours end of the semester examination, or we have minor examinations. So this abrupt shift, or rather a radical and revolutionary shift to PBL, requires us to do away with this range of examinations and see what best we can do. We will come to that in a little while. Next comes is the lack of funding. Yes, it is. And I really like the second one here. I think we have an ex-serviceman on the participants who said, let us convert every challenge into an opportunity. Yes, but since we need a leadership support to do this, I think the first challenge for us would be to buy in our leadership in our institutes to see how we can convert the challenge into an opportunity. Then there's item 4 there, which says for subjects like mathematics, it's really challenging. Yes, my dear friend, mathematics is challenging, not because maths is difficult, simply because to be able to solve certain problems in courses like mathematics, a large amount of theoretical and practical knowledge is required for mathematics or for even physics or chemistry. So these subjects are what I refer to them as a theory-heavy subjects. So for theory-heavy subjects, it takes some time, both for students and faculty members, to meet the competency to solve problems from workplaces. The item 6 is monitoring, yes, and lastly is low productivity. So with this, I just want to cover what information you gave me about the challenges of PBL under different categories. So all these are real, and these are the ones which generally kill our productivity. I just have one more. Institute related, this is a fact. As you saw, 80% of my participants here belong to affiliated institutes. For them, it's a daunting, impossible task to try and bring in PBL courses in their curriculum. Yes, it is true. But there is something called as micro PBL, which I will talk in a little while if you wish to try it out in your university. And despite being in a university or autonomous institute, we have certain challenges in which university curriculum is bounded by time and credits. So how do I buy that time and credits for a PBL course? That is not something which I, as an individual faculty, can do it, but probably it requires leadership buy-in to do that. We'll just talk about it in a little while again. So with this one, I go into the core of my presentation today. When you do a quick search on Google for PBL, you get both problem-based learning and project-based learning. While literature often sees problem-based learning and project-based learning as separately, but I have a unique way of looking at it, in which for engineering, when I say I refer to engineering education. I cannot see problem-based and project-based learning as separate for engineering education. Why it is, will come in a little while. But despite having this clear-cut distinction between problem-based and project-based learning, in PBL, students choose an open-ended, structured problem, which is authentic. And this problem is a theme, a very broad thing that's occurring in the society. Now, through analysis, information gathering, and talking to stakeholders, this problem is brought down to a very solvable problem, which is referred to as a formulated problem or a problem formulation. Now, for this formulated problem, the students develop a solution. Now, this solution can be a design, a working model, or it can be a prototype, can be a tool, a plan, just a solution and paper. So it doesn't matter what they create. Just that at the end of the student's learning, the problem must see a solution, which can be a design, can be a CAD, it can be can be a 3D model, or it can be a simulation, or it can just be a working prototype, or it can be a tool or a plan or a paper-based solution. It can be any of these. Now, this is actually in line with the principles of constructionism, which says that if we hold certain knowledge, then we should be able to act and produce something tangible out of it. So this is where it comes. Education is an act of acting. Education is all about acting or being, and not just about knowing. So this is where the principle of constructionism comes into picture and what problem-based learning is all about. Talking about taking this further, problem-based learning or project-based learning, I see them as together. I'll tell you why in a little while. Has three core elements. It is the problem, the students who work on the problem, and the faculty or the course lecturer or the course instructor. Now, this problem that we give to students, this problem either comes from the industry first, or it may come from the students, they themselves going out into the society and finding the problem, or it may be the faculty's own crafted problem. So when I look at this, the problem is at three levels: a real, authentic, or fictional. A real problem is one that occurs in a society for which there are real stakeholders, in which the all dynamics of uncertainty, multiple stakeholders, multiple perspectives all come into the picture. Authentic problems are those which have been scaled down to meet the requirements of and feasibility of an academic environment. I'll just describe that in a little while. So when I say, for example, if I take down the problem of digital platforms in India and what are the problems they are facing, it's a very real problem. But giving that at a final year of engineering may not really work out because in the absence of a real client. So what the faculty does is the faculty takes one aspect of the problem and curates it such that they're able to solve the problem in a year's time. For example, a capstone design project. Now, fictional problems also could be also called as cases, are problems which the faculty creates for the benefit of, say, a week's problem solving or a 2 weeks problem solving or a 3 weeks problem solving in the class. So I'll just spend a little while on that. Let's take a very broad problem. I realize that being in my state, there is a shortage of manpower for farm and agricultural work. So this is a problem. It is real because it's out there happening while we talk. Now, when I send out students to analyze about this problem, probably at the final year, now it takes a lot of time for students to spot the problem, frame the problem, identify solutions, and test it, implement and test the solution. So instead, what I could be doing is, I can think of, as a faculty member, I can think of probably there are 4 solutions in which we can work about. One is, say, cooperative farming. Second is agri-mechanization. Third is government incentives, and you could have subsidy in costs. You could have all of these. Now, taking this further, what we have here is, okay, I'll just put out my pointer as well. So what I have here is, these, as a faculty member, I know that this is too broad a problem to be solved. So instead, I can think of, this is a real problem. I can think of making it authentic by looking at the 4 strands which are important for me. Now, if it is I would say, since I'm into engineering education, I may think about mechanization as a solution. Again, mechanization is a pretty broad word because agriculture by itself has so many facets to it. It could be weeding, sowing, processing, harvesting, storing, and so on. So what is it that I want my students to work on? I can bring it down to a more narrow level so that it becomes doable and feasible and technically feasible for students, say, in a 3-semester course or in a 16 weeks course. In that case, I may say, okay, you can work on the weeding part, you can work on the sowing part, and so on. This is how I can bring down the scale, complexity, and the unknown variables in a problem from a real to authentic. Now, taking this further, the next part here is students. A lot of faculty members spoke about how it is difficult for students to own their learning, be motivated, be engaged, be work in a team, be mature, have mature interaction with the faculty members. Yes, all of these are true. But then that is exactly what the aim or objective of PBL. How to do this? I'll just talk about it. Third comes a lecturer. Now, while I have control on the problem and I have control on the students, students are very malleable. They're very, very malleable. They're like plastic. So you can actually mold them. But what my problem I've seen is faculty members. We as in including me, we are so used to traditional teaching that it often becomes difficult for us to give up the control that we have. And this control comes from when I orchestrate or plan students' learning through a lesson plan, module by module. But when it comes to a PBL classroom, I just become a facilitator. I become a holder of knowledge, but I let students go through the process of learning. So this is where we also need to be trained on. In fact, there are various types of facilitation that we can talk about. I can just share the content with you, where the faculty could be a process owner, could be a phase owner, and so on, and various levels of facilitation. Yeah. This is an example that I just showed you, that how I came down from a very real problem to an authentic problem, which is solvable in an academic setting. Now, taking this further, I just want to bring in the differences between lectures and PBL learning. We already know about the only lecture-based curriculum. Are lectures bad? No, it's not. It's just that having only lectures is detrimental to students' learning and being and acting. Are written exams bad? No. But having only written exams as an indicator of learning in 3 hours, that is not effective. Are we promoting individual learners or a community of learners or a community of practice? So if you're looking at a community of practice, a community of learners, a social construction of knowledge, then only lectures will not really work out. You see, students are so used to competition until the 12th standard, and suddenly when they come to engineering, we say, okay, work in a team. This is a major problem for students, and all this leads to a lack of professional skills and workplace skills. The other thing that only lectures develop is a fixed mindset. Fixed mindset is when I know that when my cognitive abilities are not stretched, say in a PBL kind of an environment, I develop a perception that I am what is there in my textbook, and I'm unable to see beyond or solve real world problems. That's where the fixed mindset comes into picture. I cannot grow is the mindset that I develop. Lastly, societal disconnect. I want to talk about this because it's enough has been said about societal disconnect only through lectures. I remember my own engineering in 2005 when I experienced this, so I can talk all about it. Coming to PBL learning, as I said, there is a real or authentic problem. These problems are given to students, and students unpack and scope the problem themselves and identify the information needed. Now, this information that is needed is also referred to as learning issues or even learning gaps. Then the student outline their strategies to how to cover the learning gaps, and eventually they develop a new solution and they implement and test it. I'll give you concrete examples of this in a little while. At the end of the day, students, they present their solutions to their peers, faculty members, and as a report. But please note, all of this begins with a problem in mind. Taking this further, what are my drivers for PBL? These drivers for PBL can actually come from 2 different sources. Educational. In educational, I'm talking about factors that are intrinsic to students, like many participants spoke about motivation, engagement, maturity, and all these are factors related to education, which can be actually addressed using PBL. The second set of drivers comes from, say, professional. The professional competencies required for workplace problem solving and workplace performance are not really possible using lecture-based, but evidence research has shown that students involved in PBL in multiple courses are able to meet and solve professional competencies and solve workplace problems. Next is the policy aspect of it. Now, we already know about the new education policy or the Washington Accord, or you may have your own outcome-based education policies for your disciplines. So all of those are policies which mandate competency development for complex problem solving. So that is one of the impetus to developing or to adopting PBL. The last comes a social driver for it. It's a very interesting thing I've read. I'm not sure if you've heard about the Tata Center. The TCS has a center called as a Digital Innovation Square, which actually took its birth in Kumbh Mela. They wanted to develop. They started up a hackathon in the state, and this was all about digitization for managing the crowd management for Kumbh Mela. And through this, that was Societal Connect that came into that. And through that, the TCS sent up a digital impact square. You can take a look at it online, it's available. So that was how through society, they created something tangible and students there came and they solved problems for social innovation. Now, I just want to end this particular part of the session by saying that education is all about acting or being. It's not about knowing. So when I act or I be, when I act, I know what I can do with the knowledge I've gained. Or being is about the way of life. But our lecture-based traditional teaching, only lecture mode, is all about knowing. So if we have to meet this broad goal of education, then we have to come up with ways to engage students, which I'm not saying is only PBL. You can find a ways to do that. But this should be a goal of all education, whether it's engineering or otherwise. Now, let me come to the implementation aspect of it. Now, you may say, yeah, Preeti, we know about PBL, we know about its challenges and what are the various drivers to PBL. But if I have to take it forward, what am I supposed to do? Let's go with this. This is a visual. I'm going to pick it up one by one. So we have a problem. I've spoken enough about it. And at the end of the problem is given at the start of the semester in a PBL course. And it goes all the way to the end of the semester in which students give various kinds of artifacts. Artifacts is nothing but artificial objects. So a design, a model, a tool, a plan, a simulation, a 3D model, a sketch. It could be a paper-based plan. It could be anything. Now, how does this module, this kind of approach work for a cross-course level PBL? Now, let us see. A cross-course level PBL looks like this. Now, for the student to be able to start from the problem, carve out the problem, frame the problem, and go across the 16 weeks and design a model, he needs certain knowledge. This knowledge can come from probably multiple courses. Now, what I'm showing you here is a cross-course level PBL. Move this somewhere. This is what I referred to as a cross-course PBL. In a cross-course PBL, I have multiple courses in a semester that is giving the competency or developing the competency to solve this problem for students. So if you note, and please note that the PBL projects are team-based projects. PBL is all about social constructionism and constructive learning. So we also look at developing collaboration among faculty and students. So it's always about team-based projects. So this is a cross-course level PBL. Multiple courses in a semester, developing the competency required to solve a problem. But this is a very mature variant of PBL. Let me quickly show you about what it takes to develop a lower version of this. Yeah, I missed it. These green highlights here are assessments. So if you see that, there is no end of semester assessment here, no 3 hours examination. And I'm just giving you 4 as assessment milestones. You could have less or more. It depends upon the various milestones, which are indicative of student learning when they go through the problem solving process. It depends upon the course that we have in mind. Next, coming to a lower version of this. This is a course level PBL. Again, we have everything in place, just like the cross-course level PBL. But here, it is a single course whose various modules or chapters or topics, they are feeding to the learning required, the competency required to solve the given problem. So again, it is a team-based. There are again assessment milestones. Now, quickly, I just want to summarize this by saying that the cross-course level PBL will address the aggregate outcomes of the entire, say, semester. I'm not saying that you need to link all the courses in a semester. It's not that. I'm just saying that you can pick up 2 or 3 courses and see how their knowledge is integrated to solve a real-world problem. That is my approach. Here, I'm showing a very mature version of this, where all the courses are aligned to problem solving. The next part here is about how an individual course has been designed to meet real-world problem-solving competencies. Again, I'm leaving the assessment out of this because it depends upon the nature of the course and kind of what are the knowledge indicators. But again, these green triangles here are not only written examinations. They could be, to reach a design, there are various stages. You could have, for example, even to come to a 3D model, for example, even to come to 3D model, the students will have to develop the individual sketches, the isometric views, and then go on to 3D modeling it, and then individual part modeling, assembly, integration. So all these aspects can be assessed based upon the milestones. Okay. Now that we know a bit about what's PBL, what is not PBL, how do I disambiguate PBL? As I earlier said, there is problem-based learning and there is project-based learning. But for me, and as an engineering educator with this experience, my wisdom says that engineering is always about problem-oriented project-based learning. What does it mean? The students do a project, yes, this part, the students do a project, yes, but this project is actually driven by a problem that we want them to solve. So that is problem-oriented PBL. This is in fact the model of Aalborg University also, and that's where it's about a problem driving the project. Now, why is engineering is all about problem-oriented PBL? It's because, well, we engineers, we solve problems. I'm sure you know about that. So we have various kinds of problems that engineers solve. It could be design problems, troubleshooting problems, system analysis problems, case studies, or diagnostic problems, troubleshooting problems, and so on. So all these are give us a set of problems whose proficiency we have to develop in engineering education. So if you want to solve these problems or these competencies, then bring a problem in the curriculum which helps them across this learning trajectory. What is not PBL? A standalone project at the end of the semester is not PBL. You could have projects which don't begin with a problem. They are not PBL. In school education, my son comes home with various charts and various things he has to do every day, and he calls them project. The students say that they're learning how to make these projects, but they're not problem-oriented project-based learning. It's just something that they want. It's more like, task projects. There are three kinds of projects actually. The task projects, discipline projects, and problem projects. So what we get in school are nothing but task-based projects. The exercises, they're very well bounded. We know what to do. It doesn't have any unknown variables in it. They are all task projects. Discipline projects is like, developing a website using Java. We do that all the time. You want them to learn Java, or you want them to learn quick sorting, or probably you want them to learn about signals and systems. You just give them a simulation to do. They are not problem-based learning. They are discipline projects. So that is the difference. The highest category here is problem projects. So lastly, developing an algorithm or a website without having a driving problem in hand is not PBL. Now, what is PBL? PBL is very elastic. It's very flexible. It gives you a lot of freedom in these 5 principles. In fact, these 5 principles is what forms the cornerstones of PBL. The problem, the project, collaboration, exemplarity, students' responsibility of learning. I will not tell you the theory of all these, but rather I will share with you how we have implemented all these principles for the course that we have designed. That will actually stay longer with you. Now, approaches to PBL. Let's say we are excited to start a PBL on our course. Then how do we go about doing it? How do I transition to PBL? One is a top-down approach. Now, a top-down approach refers to an approach wherein there's a thrust from the leadership, an external policy or an internal policy to start off PBL on campus. This happens when any new program is being designed or new university is taking birth. Or tomorrow you decide the entire program in so-and-so college in electronics has to go take a PBL approach. And this direction for this or decision for this comes from the management or the leadership. This is a very ideal approach to go forward with. And of course, it is this is a kind of an approach which has the most support from the leadership in terms of resources, faculty, policies for incentives, and so on. The next approach here is a bottom-up approach. The bottom-up approach is what was tried at Keynote as well. And one example I can give you is about a course in the University of Technology, I think, Malaysia. I should talk about Professor Khairia Yusuf Mohammed, who has been on the forefront of PBL in Asian regions. And we also have Professor Xiang Yunlu and Professor Annette Kolmus, who are from Denmark University. They are at the forefront of PBL in Europe, and of course, Professor Ida as well. So what is the bottom-up approach? In the bottom-up approach, say a few faculty members, they come together, they're excited about teaching this new course or teaching a course in a new way. So they come together, they form a task force, and they decide to modify their course. That's a bottom-up approach. Now, a bottom-up approach has its own advantages and disadvantages. Let's come to the mixed approach. Mixed approach is what we did at Keynote for our course. While the management was aware of what we were doing, there was thrust from the management. Decision was taken by the Vice Chancellor himself, but he decided to just experiment it in a one course with faculty members who were handpicked from different disciplines, 15 faculty members. So we came together in 2015 and designed this course. This is a mixed approach of PBL. So you can take either of these approaches, but you can tell me that, Preeti, I belong to a affiliated institute. What do? I don't have the agency or the independence to do this. What you can try there is a micro approach. A micro approach is what was tried in a course on process control in 2003 in UTM Malaysia again. There's a course process control in which they tried to develop problem solve. They tried to develop a PBL-like environment for just 4 weeks in their course on process control. So you can always try that, identify those various concepts, whose integration leads to solving the problem. Identify those few concepts, and probably in that semester, just pick up 2 PBL problems and take it forward with the students. So an affiliated institute doesn't prevent you from doing this. Just 2 problems in a semester. You can try that out. Putting it all together now. So we have strategies for PBL implementation, and we have the levels of PBL. By levels of PBL, I mean, you can start off with PBL in a single course, or you can start off PBL as a micro approach, a couple of modules here and there, a couple of concepts, you can do that. Or you can think of an entire program which is designed as per PBL, or a curriculum or institutional level. And now we have single course, or you could have an integration of courses as I shared earlier, or an entire curriculum. So the Aalborg University, Denmark has an institutional approach to PBL. The entire curriculum is PBL related. So that's how they work. I can share the articles with you if you're interested. Where is Keynote? Where are we right now? We are currently here at post-level PBL. We are undergoing a massive training or workshop on PBL, in which we will be looking forward to integration of courses in a year or 2. But this is where we are right now. We have attained maturity at this level, and we are attempting this. But of course, please note that we have institutional support for developing PBL courses on campus. Now, I'd like to spend some time listening from the audience. I spoke about the course level PBL, curriculum level PBL, and integration through cross-course level PBL. Can someone just give me some advantages of course level PBL? You can give me 2 things, 2 words. The first word is advantages. Second word is disadvantages. Can you do that for me, please? You can just 5 minutes on that.
Yes, ma'am. Can I?
Yeah, you can type it in, ma'am. It's easy like that. You can send it in chat. Yes. Just 2 words, advantages and disadvantages for course level PBL. At course level, I mean faculty members coming together and trying to transform a course into PBL. You can imagine your own self or a group of faculty members who are coming together to design a PBL course, with or without institutional buy-in. Okay, this seems like a difficult question. Advantage is integration. Disadvantage is dependency. Yes. Program outcomes can be reached. Meaningful collaboration among faculty members. Yes. What do you think are the disadvantages of a few faculty members coming together, or one faculty member just trying something new? Yeah, deep learning, yes. Hot skills, yes. Mapping with different courses. Design thinking, yes, it depends upon the type of problem we are looking at. If we have a design problem, then design thinking, yes. All right, let me show you what I have with me. Imagine a set of faculty members coming together to share about a course level PPL. This advantages is you don't really need to have a wide set of faculty members with huge experience coming together. You can always experiment a PBL course at a single course level. You don't really have much to fail because you have things in control. But the disadvantages is sustenance. How long can one person go together? If you have 5 courses and in all the 5 courses, each faculty member is trying out a PBL, then look at the time frame for students. That's a burden for students. Then you lack an overview of curriculum. A curriculum is a set of competencies that comes from a set of courses that develop competency for complex problem solving. So when that overview is missing, the kind of problems that you choose will be fragmented to that course. That's what it's about. The overview of curriculum is lacking. Yes, we have. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. It is time consuming. Yes, you're right. It is indeed. So you might have having more than 2 PPL courses in a semester. Now let's quickly come to what is integration of advantages of a cross course. A couple of courses coming together. It's a system-wide approach. You are integrating competencies across multiple courses. And what about the curriculum level? This requires highest maturity, and we are not yet there to reach a curriculum level PPL. How does this curriculum level PBL go? Let's say you have a broad theme for your curriculum, designing sustainable cities or smart technologies. So this is a theme for your project across a curriculum, say a computer science, or you could have electronics or a mechanical engineering. The entire school will have a project team of designing sustainable cities. So across all the 8 semesters, you have to have that knowledge building and skill building to address sustainable city problems. So that is the kind of a top-down approach we're looking at. Now, taking this further, I would like to share a case study of a post-level PPL at my university. Here we are. What we have here is a first-year PPL course. Why first year? I'll talk about it. Our focus is on interdisciplinary engineering design experience. You all know that engineering problems are multidisciplinary in nature, and it requires domain knowledge or functional knowledge from various disciplines to come together and solve a problem. But this is not something which is supported for learning at first year. In fact, the first year curriculum is so fragmented that you have elements of civil engineering, elements of electrical engineering, elements of mechanical engineering, and so on. We're all at the elements level. In fact, there is a disease called as elementitis, which we believe the first year engineering curriculum suffers from. So we want to do away with the silos when we bring in a PBL at first course. So to be able to design such a problem, we have a team of 15 faculty members who came together in 2015. Now, please note that we had a top-down approach, leadership buy-in, but we also had a bottom-up approach, a mixed approach, where only one course was tried. So this course is all about developing the role of an engineer as a problem solver. We have a multidisciplinary approach to problem solving. The students built a simple engineering systems at the end of one semester. There's also elements of ethical and sustainability perspectives. There is project management skill because obviously it is a problem-oriented project-based learning. So it's a project, it requires project management skills and so on. Oh, why is this course so important for us? Because in 2018 to 19, we actually trained universities, 21 universities across India on this course. We were the as per all documented evidence, Tech is a first institute in India to have a interdisciplinary design experience using PBL at first year. So we had this collaboration with the IESA, India Electronics and Semiconductors Association in 2017-18, when through that collaboration, Tech, we trained faculty members from these 21 institutes. This is where they come from. This has been the far-reaching consequence of the course at first year. Now, taking this further, hide that is okay. Now, a quick thing about exploration. These are the various modules in our course: Introduction to Engineering, Engineering Design, Mechanisms, Platform-Based Learning, Project Management, Sustainability and Ethics. These are the various modules in our course. Now, how do I go from the problem to the solution? The problem here is an engineering design problem. It's an engineering design problem. Sorry. This is a design problem we're talking about. And through the design problems, the students adopt the engineering design process. They identify the design problems, they frame the problem, they generate multiple concepts, they do virtual implementation, they do 3D modeling, circuit generation, and so on. And finally, they come into prototyping. So, but again, what's important here is this is the start of the semester, and this is the end of the semester. Throughout the 16 weeks experience that we give them, each module feeds the project as and when required. And we have assessment milestones throughout the course. This is a 100% project-based learning course, so there is absolutely no theory examination for this. We have around 65% of marks for the projects. Please note in PBL, more than 50%, so 50 to 60 to 80% of marks will be given for the project. That is a defining feature of PBL. In our course, 100% of marks goes to the project and nothing else. So we have around 5 assessment instances throughout the 16 weeks. Let me give an example of what these engineering design problems look like. You could have, I'm not sharing the problem statement right now, I'm just sharing the keywords. We've had every year, we give out around 15 to 20 different design problems, which are solved by around 1,300 students at first year, which give rise to around 250 projects annually. It's a team-based project. Each team has around 4 to 5 students maximum. That's the limit we have. And we also have specific team formation strategies. So we have given problems like, cleaning machines, launching machines, Divyang solutions, musical robots, interactive toys, and robotic pets. Now, please note, when I say cleaning machine, it is so broad. Cleaning machines are real-world problems. But again, what do you want to clean? Where do you want to clean? The context is left open for students to decide. Want to launch machines for kids' games? Go ahead. But what do I launch? I launch a cricket ball, a tennis ball, a plastic ball. How for kids of what age? All of these criteria are not specified in these problems. So the problems are very ill-structured. Then, Divyang solution for specially abled. Now, this is, the challenges that specially abled citizens face. There are various challenges. We're not talking about what challenge they will address. It is left to the students to identify what challenge, what is the age of the sufferers, where are they, and all the unknown variables. The students will find out during their problem analysis process. In musical robot, you have so many musical instruments. The students can choose any musical instrument, a flute, a tabla, you name it, and they do it. Interactive toys, robotic pets. I'm sorry? Is there something you want me to ask? So these are the various things. And at the end of the 16 weeks, we have mechatronic prototypes, which are developed by students. We have mechatronic prototypes that are developed by students. Now, please note, I'm just showing a few of these. Every year, we have 250 mechatronic prototypes developed by our first year students. This is our lab space, a tinkering lab, where students are working. All right, now let's come to the principles. Why can't I hide this? Let's look at the principle, the problems. Now, how do I identify the problems for exploration? That is the goal of my next 20 minutes or so. We have a unique way of identifying problems. Firstly, the problems must lead to mechatronic solutions. By mechatronic, I mean the knowledge and skills for solving the problems comes from mechanical engineering, electronics, and programming, and control systems. These are the 3 domains that we have identified are important for us, and that is what we mean by mechatronic for us. We actually did, every semester we sit down, all faculty members sit down, and we identify the kind of problems that we can give to students for their projects. Now we analyze these problems based upon the complexity, feasibility, and whether these problems are real, authentic, and fictional. Please know that first year, I cannot give them real problems. I can give them authentic problems like the way I showed earlier. So that's how we scale it down. And we balance complexity and feasibility and students' knowledge. What I'm showing you here is a published work in transactions. We have arrived at 4 quadrants: C1, C2, C3, and C4. We know that all the problems that we frame, we categorize them based upon this framework. These frameworks are, if the problem falls under C1 category, then it means that the problem is just an exercise, a task project. It is not really a problem that they have to solve. Basically, because for us, complexity means the students will be designing the parts, or the parts are available, or the content is already covered in our course, or they have to do a lot of self-learning. In C1 category, it's basically the parts are all available off the shelf, and you don't have to do any extra learning. And remember, in PBL, what my experience says is 25 to almost 45% of learning is students' responsibility. Then we actually try to create problems or curate problems in category C2 and C3. This is where we are. This is a comfortable set both for faculty members and for students. But this is a no-go zone. C4, they're very complex problems. It requires lots of time for students as well as for members. So this is a no-go zone for me. Taking this further, examples are some of the needs design problem or need statements are musical robot, for example. For an upcoming event in KLE Tech, there's a need for a robot which can play musical instruments to entertain the audience. Or human arm miming bot. People with a lost arm need a way to hold objects for eating and drinking. So these are a very broad set of problems we give them. And these problems, they fall under C3, C4, C2. We don't expect in C1 category problems. So what do you have to do if you want to design these problems? Please form a team first. That's important. Identify a course which develops competencies for solving problems, which are the course must conveniently or intuitively lean towards developing or real-world problems or applications of real-world problems. So find those courses. It's easier for faculty members. Then consider the prior knowledge of students and maturity of learning, and also create a problem pool. Now, a group of faculty members, I suggest that you come together, create a problem pool, and have certain indicators of complexity. You know, what's complex for students, what is feasible for students, how much of extra learning they need to do. So please do that first. So it all depends upon, at the first shot, it is not students, it is faculty members who need to come together. The next principle here is, where is it? Is about, okay, some examples of problems I want to share with you. Now, I was very interested in the earlier session by Professor Jeff Curie, and I'd like to tell you that I have curated these problems using ChatGPT. These problems, I took them from ChatGPT and I modified them based upon what I want to give to students. The first problem here is workers are shifting load regularly between 2 locations. After a few years of working in that workshop, the workers are claiming insurance for injury that they believe caused from repetitive stress on their musculoskeletal system. Now, you are accompanying an insurance agent to verify the claims made by the workers. Go ahead and generate a report on the same. So this is a biology and physics problem to identify. It's a biology and physics problem. Now think about this. You could give this biology and physics faculty members can come together and create a problem like this. Yes, this is from ChatGPT, but modified with what I wanted to say. Second problem is an outdoor recreation center is to be developed at an outskirts of your city. All citizens are excited about bungee jumping. You are tasked with ensuring the safety of the bungee jumping facility for the jumpers. Now, it's a very broad problem. It's a real problem, but it can't be solved at the level of students. Why? Because an adventure center like this will require solutions at multiple levels. First is developing safety standards for safety standards for India, having governmental policies at ensuring these standards are followed. And then comes the physical aspects of safety. Now, if it's an engineering course or if it's a physics course, it becomes too broad for students. Now, how do I tame this problem? I just add something more to this. You need to specifically focus on determining the elastic constant of the elastic cord used at bungee jumping site and determine the safety of the project by calculating the maximum acceleration of the jumpers. So with this, what was so broad, so real, I made it authentic, which is feasible for probably a physics course. This is how the faculty members can, play with the problems and keep certain variables open or close certain variables based upon the prior knowledge of students. The last set is a typical school problem. Your school is committed to reducing its energy consumption and environmental impact. As a leader, you've been given a task to assess and improve the energy usage in the school. Your goal is to identify areas of high energy consumption, propose energy saving solutions, and educate the community. This is a broad problem, but you know that it is talking about energy consumption, energy saving solutions, and this can be done by a school as well, school students as well. So this is how problems are framed. Projects, most important again. As you know, it is problem-oriented project-based learning, or it can be called as project-organized problem-based learning. That's also okay. Both are fine. Now, because it's a project, a project is nothing but a set of a project has a set of objectives which you want to attain within a given time. So that's a project. A project is generally collaborative in nature. So what skills do I need? I need the skills of project management, collaboration, teamwork. Now, generally, in a traditional course, we don't have this. So the challenge, this is the major challenge students face. Then what are the project phases? What are the timelines for project execution? So all these things, these are in fact, there's a called as transversal competencies. For example, ethics and sustainability and collaboration and project management. There are transversal competencies. So how do I develop these? It's something which I would think about. You can have an add-on module for this, or you can have a special workshop on this, on how to develop these skills. Now, what do I do in exploration? In exploration, as I earlier said, we follow a design process. We have a project management module. And this is how we give them week-wise project deliverables timelines. This gives you a review and all the information that we have. And by the way, this information is available on a journal article. So all of the information is available by journal article. I'm not really sharing anything that is specific to Keynote. It's all available in open domain. And this is a Gantt chart we give students. Week-wise, what are you required to do? This is for our projects. So if you have your projects and your problems, you must have means to identify all these dynamic things that require students to take care of. Supplementary courses. Yes, this is important. The projects are supported by courses that are often scheduled frequently in the beginning of a semester and allow for more uninterrupted time at the project towards the end of the semester. Now, you know that we've been talking about post-level PBL and cross-course level PBL, institutional level PBL. Now, how do they differ? A quick recap on that. You have a single course, various modules are supporting the projects. You also have a set of courses or a set of at a program level, or you could have a number of projects fed by different courses or different disciplines, or you could have a theme at a curriculum level. Now, these visuals are specifically from the Aalborg model by Denmark, Professor Ida Guerra and Professor Changyun Du and Professor Kolmas. They are the forefront of PBL, and these models come from them, which we have adopted for Keynote as well. Now, earlier it said about this part. The courses are often scheduled frequently in the beginning and allow for more uninterrupted time. So this is what it means. If you're having a course level PBL, you could have lectures, self-learning, textbooks, labs, etc. at the beginning of the semester. This is a time domain. It's a time and then timeline. And here's the project work. Initially, the students are able to find the problem, frame the problem, develop multiple solutions, implement it, test it, and so on. So as the course learning reduces, there's more work on the project. This is exactly where we are currently in exploration. We have come to the last 1 month of the semester. We are somewhere over here, and here abruptly all our theory ends. Students are basically working on the project all the time. So this is where our model comes into the picture. So what next? The next part here is collaboration supervisors. How do we do it in exploration? As I earlier said, what the most important thing here is faculty members letting go of their control that they are the leaders in students' life who will be driving their learning throughout the semester. The faculty here becomes a facilitator, sometimes acting as a collaborator with partners, other groups. Now with this, yes, how do we do this? It is generally not possible for faculty members to give all the time required during the theory courses or during the timeline. So we actually have office hours. We give an hour and a half every week for students to come to us and talk about their problems, or talk about the issues of their learning. We spend this time with them. It is published on our on my calendar. It's always there, office hours. But other than that, students can come and meet me when and where they want. I spend time in their tinkering lab. Tinkering lab is our prototyping facility. I'm available there. I'm there in the learning studio, wherever students want me to. But the students here are primarily driving their learning. Then, okay, I have the design problems that I showed you, miming robot, musical bot, and so on. While the students are gaining knowledge from their course and through their own self-learning and the investigation of learning, I, as a faculty member, should be aware of what knowledge and skills are required to do that. So I have a lot of work to do in the background for that project. I must know exactly what learning or what knowledge gaps will come during the process. I should be able to answer the questions students come with me. For example, yesterday, one of the students came to me and said, listen, I'm using these color sensor and it's not working. And then I realized that, okay, I knew that there was an issue with the color sensor. And I said, no, it's not a color. So I told her, this is not the way you're going to do it. Use some other module and try and work with that one. So that's how we are prepared for the answers that students will come up with, although we prepared for the questions that students will come up with in future. Then there is learning across project teams. If there's one team which has, say, example, I remember this, we had one flex sensor which students were using, and only one team was using, I think entire class required flex sensors, but nobody was aware of it. So the students conducted a workshop for everybody else in the class on how to use a flex sensor, or a faculty member conducted a workshop for all the students using it. So this came at the point where the students wanted to know how the flex sensor works. And lastly comes interdependence between team members. Now, we break down tasks into various phases across a project, and we bring in different kinds of interdependencies between students, like goal interdependency, resource interdependencies, reward interdependencies, and so on. So this is what I'm showing you here, one of my previous tasks for my PhD stuff. So we like this particular work breakdown was given for information gathering task. This work breakdown was given for problem definition task or problem formulation task. This breakdown was given for concept generation. And this one was given for detailed design. So each of these, we as faculty members give them various task aids or worksheets which have inbuilt interdependence to enforce collaboration between students. All right. What next?
Ma'am, due to time constraint, we would request you to please conclude in 5 minutes.
Yes, surely, we will do that.
Thank you.
Yes, sure. We'll do that. Lastly comes exemplary content. Exemplary content is that content which is required for real-world problem solving. And that is what for us, this part is about problem solving, interdisciplinarity of problems, and engineering projects. This is what we mean by exemplary content. What is required for workplace problem competence. Next comes self-learning and ownership. For this, again, we motivate students for workshops through interdependencies and extra learning that comes in required for them. So there is a trajectory across semester wherein the students own their learning. I will skip this one. Yeah, this is important. Now, please note, for any curricular change, we require these components: vision from the university, consensus among stakeholders, skills developed for the faculty members, incentives, resources required, and action plan. So this is what at Keynote we've been doing, working across all these 6 dimensions to ensure that we are ready for any kind of a new innovation at Keynote. So in fact, any faculty member, any institute wants to do it, they must think across these 6 dimensions. And lastly, I just have to spend some time about the here. Okay. Yeah. We currently have a PBL certification program, which is being driven by the Aalborg University, Denmark. in which 5 universities across these states are participating. It's a 1-year-long PBL engagement in which it's a very immersive engagement. It's online on Zoom, and with the resource persons from Aalborg and India, I'm one of them. We help autonomous and universities to redesign or design a course for PBL. This is a 1 year's engagement, 6 months of design and 6 months of implementation. In fact, we'll finish the first cohort in January next year. We have two more. We intend to have 2 more cycles of PBL training for India. And yes, lastly, I invite you all to 2 conferences at Tech. One is the Research and Engineering Education Symposium in Jan 24. We also have i-CiTeL conference in 2024 Jan again. But most importantly is a PBL Research Symposium in November 2024. You will be able to meet many stalwarts of PBL traveling from India and abroad to this conference. You'll also see what it takes to redesign a course from lecture-based to probably a PBL course in this conference. So with this, some of my work that I want to share with. And lastly, I want to stop at this slide. Yes, thank you for reminding me about the time. And I'm done with it. Thanks so much.
All right, ma'am. Thank you very much. It was indeed really valuable to us because, I mean, it was a very comprehensive approach, with, project and problem-based learning. So we are waiting for questions from the participants. So, ma'am, I do have like one question to raise, and it's like for PBL, to be effective, it requires this multiple discipline integration. So how do we, connect with the other departments? Because here the case started with, first year engineering graduates. So how do you integrate the other disciplines when it comes to PBL?
We actually tried this in a course called as EDPR, Engineering Design and Project Realization, which was a multi-department or a multi-school project, which came together using a top-down approach. It was a vision of the university. We identified those problems that require an interdisciplinary approach to problem solving. So that was a top-down approach. We identified disciplines in which can contribute to it. So we designed a separate course for it, which came together. And in that course, the students were given a problem. The team formation was done such that we had participants or students from different disciplines, faculty members from different disciplines, and that's how they took. But please note that this approach would require a cross-disciplinary assessment, not just confined to disciplinary assessment that we are generally used to. Yes, that's how we go about it. We'll take a top-down approach for this, not a bottom-up approach.
Right.
Because we require the curricular provisions to make this happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, talking about, ma'am, identifying the faculties and then, creating a problem tool. How do you initiate this particular work? Because, not every faculty has that vision of, guiding the students when it comes to PBL. So how do you do that?
Okay, yeah. This was a strategy that our leadership followed. They picked up for faculty members from different disciplines, 2 or 1, who were self-motivated, who had the drive to do things. They picked up those people, pick up the stars from universities. And we had a constraint that these stars must be less than 45 years of age. For some reason, we have that, but it's not true, right? Age isn't a constraint. So we picked up those people and the faculty members, 15 of them, and then they were trained with the skills required for PBL. And then they were given to design a course. But please note, our first journey of PBL, our first conference, first workshop came from Professor Vinod Lohani's team from Virginia Tech, USA. That was the first workshop on PBL in 2015-16. But since then, that was the first workshop that all these 15 faculty members were exposed to. And then we took this course forward. But when you have these multiple faculty members coming together, they report to multiple HODs. Please remember that. So they have to come together under one leader who will lead this course for you. Something like a PBL task force. The PBL task force can have a leader, a dean, or some faculty at that level, and they report to this person. So that is a kind of a layer. In our case, it was Professor Dr. Gopal Krishna Joshi who led the Center for Engineering Education Research. These faculty members came together at that center to do it. Yes.
All right. So thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank
So
you.
dear participants, it was Dr. Preeti Balga from KLE Technological University, Hubli. So we thank you very much, ma'am, for your active participation. And on behalf of Anjuman Islam's Kalseka Technical Campus, we wish to share, your certificate of appreciation on behalf of this institute. And again, from the depth of our heart, thank you very much, ma'am, for sparing your valuable time. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Wishing you all the best.
Over to you, organizer. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Okay. Sarah, ma'am, or Rohan, sir?
Yes. In the session, we will meet again for a panel discussion. We will meet again for the panel discussion at 3 p.m. Is that right, Shaima?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you can finish this.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I'll stop recording then.